How it feels to chew 5 gum. Stimulate your senses.
Man, people don't give early God of War enough credit for how influential it was, because after those first 2 games, the fucking floodgates were open for hack and slash games that just blatantly took from them. Some were less obvious, like Darksiders, which took from both God of War and Legend of Zelda and just kind of dressed it up a bit, but then you got Dante's Inferno, where there is so much shit taken, I'm surprised Santa Monica didn't say anything. Reception to it was pretty whatever, as games like it were a dime a dozen back then, but these days, people sell this game as if it were some underrated cult classic, which doesn't really make sense to me because I copped this game back in 2010 and I really didn't think that much of it. Used it as a holdover for God of War 3, which came out a month later, but you know, that was back in 2010. My tastes have changed, gaming has changed, and even the developers of this game have definitely changed as they're no longer around anymore. Yeah, the freaking Dead Space guys are behind this game. Sometime between Dead Space 1 and 2, they somehow shat this game out. I wouldn't be surprised that the development of this game was mad quick, because it really seems like the whole premise of this game was made for a video game. So for those that don't know, this game is based off Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, an influential medieval poem that's responsible for all the crazy ass imagery when we think of hell. Only reason I know this is because I had to read some of this shit in English class. Also, Wikipedia. Anyway, this game takes place during the Crusades, where Christians and Muslims didn't get along very much. You play as one of the guys on the Christian side named Dante, who, for whatever reason, likes to stitch his memories on himself. One day while spreading the Lord's name, he dies getting stabbed in the back. However, when faced by death, he decides that traditional death isn't for him, so he kills death himself with his own scythe and then steals that shit. After that disrespect, he returns home looking for comfort in his wife Beatrice, only to find that she's been brutally murdered. Also his dad too, but we don't care about him. Her soul seems to be intact, but Lucifer slides in and snatches that up real quick. Guided by the poet Virgil, the rest of the game sees Dante fighting through the 9 circles of hell to not only save his wife, but also redeem himself in the eyes of the Lord.
We came here to kill these heretics! We came to reclaim the Holy Land! Since when are heretics worth a Christian life? Enough!
Yeah, Dante's a pretty bad guy, but we'll get to that later. So this has to be the grossest, most depraved depiction of hell I've seen in a while. Yeah, some of this imagery is definitely not gonna leave me. Never seen gigantic tits with tongue spewing out the nipples before, and I don't think I ever want to again. Some sick fuck is probably jacking off to this as we speak. You got these lust monsters that attack you with their genitals, unbaptized murder babies, rivers of excrement and blood, and that's not even getting into the constant moans of pain you hear from souls in the wall. It's fucked up. I feel like dousing my eyes with holy water after this. But you know, it definitely fits. Hell's supposed to be like the worst place imaginable, and they definitely get that across here. Some of these designs of the old mythological figures are also pretty unique. Like, I never would have imagined Charon the Ferryman as the actual boat itself, and also whatever the hell Cerberus in this game is. However, the gruesomeness does kind of blend together after a while. They tried their best to diversify the look of the different stages by like adding pawns of gold and greed and fires and heresy and stuff, but it all ends up looking pretty samey throughout. Still, the art direction really holds this game together, especially with these animated flashbacks that play out like nightmares. It depicts the surface world as being just as hellish as hell itself, which gives this whole game an air of bleakness. I like that they went all in and didn't opt for a teen rating, but sometimes it feels like this game does cross the line into just being edgy for the sake of it. Graphically, this game is looking a little fuzzy these days. Yeah, this game definitely could use the remaster treatment, but I will say it hasn't aged as bad as some others from this era. Okay, so this might sound a little dismissive, but seriously, if you played any of the early God of War games, then you practically played this game. All the mechanics that I'm about to talk about should sound familiar. You fight off waves of enemies with the scythe here, where you can perform some sick combos alternating between quick and heavy attacks. You got magic that you can play around with that you primarily get from bosses. You're encouraged to finish off enemies and bosses in gruesome ways through QTEs. The game is pretty linear, and when you're not laying the smack down, the game challenges you with puzzles and platforming. Most of the puzzles involving moving big boxes, and a lot of the platforming being climbing these clearly marked walls. Yeah, they didn't just copy one or two equations from Santa Monica, they took the whole fucking blueprint. My eyebrow is definitely raised with sections like the wind-blowing titan that just so happens to be a big part of the second level of God of War 2. They practically have Deimos in this game before Deimos was even introduced. Maybe Santa Monica actually copied them there though. I can see why this game was easily forgotten about because there's very few ideas here that are original. Still, I've enjoyed plenty of generic games in the past, as what really matters to me is whether the execution is on point, and luckily, the execution is mostly pretty good here. Combat is chaotic and fast paced with the scythe having this nice snap to its attacks. There's also plenty of sweeping moves for multi-enemy slaughter, which always makes these type of games fun. What really brings the combat together though is this holy cross move where Dante literally shoots out a bunch of light crosses. This thing has mad spread, which allows for some crazy long combos without even being near enemies. However, the cross moves and the scythe attacks don't really combo into each other, which I think was a missed opportunity for this combat system to really excel. You have to commit to either one or the other, which does feel a bit rigid at times. There's this whole general theme of either punishing or absolving enemies, which I think the game wanted to lean into. Punishing enemies levels up your unholy level, while absolving enemies levels up your holy one. Unholy upgrades the capabilities of your scythe, while holy upgrades the capabilities of the cross. This is probably the one thing that this game has over God of War. It's super dope that you actually get a choice in how you want to eliminate enemies, and the two different skill trees allows for more flexibility in how you can play Dante. Shit, and that's not even getting into all the different relics that you can equip. Peak Holy is better than Unholy though, and the game knows that too, since you have to play this stupid ass minigame whenever you absolve a phantom. Thank God for auto absolve later where you don't have to do this shit. Though the combat in this game is pretty solid, I never really felt like it reached the heights of the games that it's inspired by. There's no big gaping flaws really, there's just a bunch of little irritations that just added up for me. For one, you just don't do enough damage in this game. Look at this, look at all these hits that I'm laying into this asshole that just don't matter. Either you don't do enough damage, or enemies in this game have too much health. I'm not entirely sure which is the case. All I know is that the time to kill in this game drags, and that also makes each encounter in general feels like they last too long. This is especially the case in the second half of this game, where enemy spawns just don't stop. It always feels like a fight is over, and then the game just spawns another horde for good measure. Maybe if magic was more intertwined with the combat, then this wouldn't be an issue. And the reason I say this is because this game is really fucking stingy with the mana. These fountain thingies that fill up your mana only fill it up partially, and each spell takes a buttload of mana to activate. This means that you have to conserve your magic for big fights only, which is pretty lame. Also, I really hate how inconsistent the invisible walls in this game are. Some fights it's impossible for you to fall off, while in other fights enemies can just smack you off, killing you instantly. It's a shitty double standard too, since you can't do the same back to enemies. I will say that this game does shine when it comes to its boss battles and just overall spectacle. A lot of them are big, scary, and unexpectedly difficult. Seriously, the bosses in this game are a pretty sharp escalation in difficulty. I can't be the only one that was having a hard time with this fat ass. And Lucifer too, but he's the last boss, so of course he's going to be challenging. They are placed in weird locations though. You would think that for each circle of hell, there would be a boss waiting at the end of it, but nah. Half of these circles you leave anticlimactically. Bosses like Dante's dad and Francesco just kind of show up out of nowhere, which means if you're not healed up prior to the fight, you can be screwed with low health and magic going into those fights. But enough about that. How's the puzzles and platforming and general non-combat stuff? Well, unfortunately with the puzzles, this game takes influence from the first God of War. And the reason that's bad is because the first God of War is notorious for having some of the most aggravating puzzles. We're talking about timed instant kill puzzles with little margin for error. Fuck, these are annoying. It's less about figuring out how to do something than it is performing multiple tasks at once under time constraints, which is something I typically don't care for. None of them are as bad as the insta-kill cave box puzzle in God of War 1, but I still can't say I enjoyed getting scorched by this fire one here. This isn't to say that all the puzzles in this game are bad. I quite like this one in Gluttony where you're going through these portals. The perspective is pretty cool, and I don't know what dimension this is, but it's pretty creepy. As far as the platforming, most of it are these swinging sections that are usually placed to go from one hell circle down to another. Don't really have much to say about these. I mean, it's your typical avoid the fire stuff, something for the player to do between the action segments, I guess. It's adequate, but nothing special, which, you know, the more I talk about this game, it's kind of how I feel about it as a whole. This game is well made in so many aspects, but there's nothing here that truly draws me in. It doesn't have that X factor that other games like it possess. You know, God of War isn't just about its gratuitous violence, it also has an epic story and presentation. Devil May Cry has extremely stylish combat that lets you experiment, and Bayonetta has, well, Bayonetta. Dante's Inferno, I mean, I guess its depiction of hell is pretty cool, and its interpretation of the poem is unique, but I don't think those things are enough for me to ever come back to this game. As far as the story, I would probably be more into it if I was more into Dante as a character. Every word out this man's mouth is Beatrice, which started to annoy me. Yeah, I get it. His wife's been kidnapped, so of course he's going to be distressed, but even besides that, he's a pretty blank slate. These past snippets of who he used to be indicate a way more interesting character that's not really in the present. But you know, I guess there's only so much you can explore in a short game like this. I guess that's also why they released an animated film along with this game. It's actually pretty solid. You get more insight into the world, Dante's relationships, and it also does the whole animatrix thing where each part of it has a completely different art style. I recommend it for anyone that really likes this game, but I'm getting a little off track as this isn't a goddamn movie review. As far as the game, it's pretty spot on to the chain of events that happen in the poem. Of course, there's no epic boss fights like Cleopatra and shit. I'm just talking about the main storyline of Dante going through all the subsequent stages of hell. However, any literature nerds still watching this video shouldn't use this as a substitute because the whole point of Dante's redemption has been downgraded in this version. Instead of the hidden divine angel that saves Dante, Beatrice is just another damsel in distress that the camera loves to show off. Seriously, here's a drinking game for you. Take a shot whenever this game shows Beatrice's tits. By the end of the night, you should be pretty wasted. So yeah, moral of the story, don't cheat on your girl because then Satan might come and steal your girl. So yeah, that's Dante's Inferno. Not as bad as I remember, but also not as good as I want it to be. It's still solid enough that if a sequel ever came out, I would probably check it out, and it's also good enough that I would recommend this game for those that like hack and slash games, but unfortunately this game has yet to be ported over to PC and modern consoles. Only way to play it now is if you have an old 360 or PlayStation 3 lying around. Maybe if there's a high demand for this game in the future that'll change, but I doubt it. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about this one. Like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and until next time.